you're mandated to do the proactive efforts where you're not in other cases, but in New Hampshire, DCYF really is trying to do the proactive efforts in every case. And the big impediment in achieving that always is caseloads. I mean, your caseloads are ridiculous.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. And the resources, and it's, and that's probably the biggest reason why I was no longer brought in to do the training for Indian Child Welfare Act, is it had to become an internal thing where you had,
I agree with you.
yeah, people at the state level doing that were employees. Yeah, not because people don't want to do good work, but there's a lot of complications that get in the way. Yes?
I was wondering, that when they, thinking about how painful it was to recount some of the trauma. And I know some people who've worked in trauma have found that that when you have to recount it like that, you're re-traumatized again. And it just struck me as, I wonder if this was the best process to actually choose at this point, you know, and you know, and when you see the reluctance of some people to even enter into that, what is your feeling about that?
And for those people that had that ripped open, what was it like to have, yeah, I mean, what was the follow-up? That was one of my questions, is what has come afterwards. And honestly, I mean, Remy mentioned what I knew about the TRC process in Maine. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, acquaintances of mine, I've seen and heard conversations about so-and-so sharing their story, and now I'm sure it was through this process in recent years that the many people, or some Maine people, I mean, 200 stories collected out of 8,000 people isn't a very high percentage. It's, yeah, what's the motivation? I mean, I think she said it well. Why? We're from the government and we're here to help you. I mean, it hasn't worked well for Native Americans. It hasn't been true.
When they took those people out separately, you know, and you know, it was almost like a voyeuristic thing that seemed like it was going on with watching, and they needed to.
Oh, you mean when they separated the whites from the Indians?
The cultural integration, going back to the dances and stuff. I wonder if that would be more healing.
I'm sorry, ask it again.
No, I was just wondering your opinion. Do you think that kind of action is more healing to go through, to reintegrate into the culture, to bring back the culture more?
Yeah.
And in the end, because that's rather than you know, spending as much, you know, a balance to balance out the pain of the trauma.
So, for my own family are Abenaki. We always knew we were Abenaki. Nobody ever denied or hid it. My family hid in plain sight. My mother's family, I have a lot of different branches of Abenaki family ancestry. But growing up, I grew up in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Growing up in Hillsborough, knowing we were Indian, but the only image you had growing up was Hollywood images. So trying to picture, and it was always, you know, Grammy so-and-so was where the Indian, or the Indian, I know, that's where the Indian came. So I'm trying to picture my grandmother, you know, in a teepee with buffalo and in Bradford, New Hampshire, or you just not, so, and you can kind of chuckle, but honestly, I was at Colby Sawyer College listening to a woman from one of the Minnesota tribes tell her story of residential schools. And I couldn't believe how emotional I got in terms of, I was young then, but in terms of feeling how isolated I felt, how deprived I felt of my own culture. And in terms of, you know, there's been a lot, as the Wampanoag fellow talked about AIM and his experience at Boston College and learning more and more about his culture. I think for a lot of the New England tribes, there's been a lot of trying to relearn, you know, not just trying, but succeeding in bringing our culture back alive and learning about it. And so I think that, for me personally, has been really, really healing, that part. But in terms of the stories of the trauma, I think part of the frustration, and we've talked about that, whether it was DCYF or the lady that was from the Reach office that was here, the hard part is you get funding, you get some funding to do some work, but then you don't get the follow-up funding to carry on with it. And so that really was my big question, is what kind of follow-up are people able to provide for those who told their story. But I do think that telling the story is healing. I also was really, really struck with, did anybody here feel like there was any correlation between these old stories of trauma getting ripped open and kind of the national events we're hearing this week? Yeah, and I think that's been pretty healing and cathartic for a lot of people.
When we,
I work with trauma every day and I've lived with it my whole life. I have always had a deep curiosity and love for the Native Americans because I came from a part of Wisconsin where many nations met all the time, and they didn't meet while I was living there, they met long ago. But what I really admire about the Indians is their community. And working with trauma, yes, some people are absolutely embedded in their trauma. This is why brain science, with all the explosions in the last 10 years, has changed psychotherapy so much, because psychotherapists have to realize now that they've just been embedding us all in our own stories, or just forcing us to re-traumatize ourselves. But I don't think that that's all bad, because when you sit and have these people tell their stories, it's very difficult. It's extremely difficult. But and some don't get over it. You know, everybody is different. But in the end, we all are now aware of this, and we can all heal. Because in my estimation, we are all one family on Earth, period. It doesn't matter where you come from, what color your skin is. I mean, I have relegated my life to white social society. I've always married white men, and I'll tell you, I have not been that happy. I haven't found a lot of good things. I have made them for myself, but I have also, in the process of this, made a gigantic network of friends all across this country, because I've lived everywhere, that I rely on today. And they are all different races, all different nationalities, all different cultures, everything that is transgenders, gays, lesbians, everything. Because I do believe in one family. And I think that we all have so much to learn from the Native Americans about family and neighborhood and community spirit in raising our children. Not, you know, cutting them out or cutting them off in any way. I want you to know that I'm a new trustee at the Indian Museum. I'm just thrilled. I also discovered I have 1% Native American Indian. I'm just incredibly thrilled. But it doesn't really matter, except for the fact that we treat each other with kindness and open heart, understanding. I'll tell you, I'm so sorry for what us white Hawkeys have done to the Native American, and I just need you to know that.
Well, thank you, I'll accept that, but as everybody can see, this is a pretty white face. And I am French, English, and Indian. And what I tell everybody is, how many people in this room have heard the English language before and can speak the English language? everybody, obviously. How many people in this room have heard the French language before? Okay, and so a few people, not everybody. How many people before today in the room have heard the Abenaki language? A few Abenaki people.
We want to hear more.
And so, if I don't celebrate, if I don't, like, I own my Abenaki culture because if I don't own that part of my ancestry, there's no other place you're gonna go to. I mean, there's Odanak, but it's a moribund culture that needs those of us who rightfully belong in that culture to claim it and to reclaim it and to exercise it. If I choose not to do the same with my French and English culture, those cultures are alive and thriving. Yes?
So I'm one of those kids from Nashua. My father moved in from Canada. I'm a native. It's kind of funny is everybody, you know, always wants to be native, which is fine. I totally agree with you. But when you're born and brought up that way, and everybody looks at you different because you're not a white person. But I just did my ancestry DNA, and I'm actually white. I'm actually 67% white. I'm European. So you got to embrace everything that you are. I'm Native American. Yes, I've always identified Native American. I always go to powwows. I do all that kind of stuff. Also, a question, a thing towards the stolen children. It's the stolen children's children.
On the film, you mean? Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to your parent
Right.
is passed on to you.
Yes. Yeah.
So sometimes it gets frustrating when everybody wants to be native, especially if you were brought up white. And you lived your life as a white person, then all of a sudden you're 30 years old and you're all of a sudden native. But it's different.
Right. It was very powerful for me. I also was served on the Indian Museum board, and at the time I was the only Native person on the board. And there was a decision being made about whether or not to accept some artifacts. It was a complicated case, but at any rate, these were Abenaki bones and other, not bones, but Abenaki burial items and other similar things. So it was an important issue for our people, and the Attorney General was involved. I was sworn to secrecy anyway, but all the white board members were asked their opinion, and I waited to hear what everybody was going to say, and I was feeling very conflicted because it was a horrible position to be put in. I couldn't speak for my whole community. Now I'm going to have this knowledge, and I'm not supposed to share it with anybody. And then they didn't even want to hear my opinion. They moved on. And having this white face and having that privilege and growing up with that, it was the very first time I had ever been treated, to my knowledge, with the kind of racism that you've experienced every day of your life.
No, you never have. I've been in a restaurant 10 years ago. This was in 2008 in Canada, and I wasn't served because I was with a couple other Indians.
Mm-hmm.
So that's racist.
Yeah. Well, so, okay.
It's different. You would never understand.
No, I wouldn't. Thank you for sharing, though. Any other comments?
I hesitated to ask because you identify as pretty much white, but with an interest in your heritage as Abenaki. And maybe this isn't an appropriate question with only one person who is self-identified as being from a Native background, but I'm curious because I thought it was entirely very powerful to have that ceremony with the tissues that were full of tears, and whether but whether it was truly healing, because I resonated with that idea that a lot of this is re-traumatizing, but if it is re-traumatizing that then leads somewhere, and I'm wondering whether that was powerful in your estimation or not.
Everybody, all the different tribes look at things differently, so you can't go by what one tribe does versus another tribe. So I think different things are powerful, but for them, it was probably really powerful at that moment.
And even each individual within each tribe, right, has their own reaction to things. And just to clarify, I'm Abenaki. I identify 100% as Abenaki. I acknowledge the color of my skin is white. I don't pretend that my experience in this world, if I just walk into a room and I don't talk about who I am, I enjoy the same privilege any other white-skinned person enjoys. If I say who I am, then to varying degrees, depending on the circumstances, I start to lose that privilege based on identifying myself as the culture I relate to. Anyway. Remy, are we getting close on time here?
Yeah, yes, we are. But I was going to comment that when we first were given this movie, the overwhelming reaction on the webinars and stuff was that we were showing this because it correlated with the removal of children at the southern border. I think they had no idea, but it's one of those brilliant timing things that trauma would be the topic by the time the movie actually played. And it's one of those fun things about working at Red River is that timely things happen. So let me just thank Sherry for coming and those of you. Oh, you want to say something else? But back there.
Yeah.
Back row.
Hi, my name is Paul Kugler. I'm the Southern for the Cossack Band of Abenaki people. We're headquartered here in North New Hampshire. We've been handling child welfare cases since the inception of the Act. The interesting thing is that every case is so individually framed that it's very difficult to deal with these child welfare cases. We have 2 currently being handled right now. You think it's just black and white that somebody's ripping a child out of a family. In some cases, it's as simple as 2 grandmothers, a white grandmother and an Indigenous grandmother, fighting over a grandchild that's been kind of thrown up in the air because their parents are incarcerated. One of the problems we see is most of the states do notify us immediately if they come in under the ban of being Indigenous, Abenaki or Pennacook. We usually will get a call or some kind of correspondence within the moment the judge hears that there's an Indigenous issue going on. Some states are better than others. California has been trying to push back, saying that they only